Hey guys, this is another episode of the show called Discussions, where I bring innocent bystanders onto the camera and talk about whatever the hell that they want. I'm Mike. I am a New York City-based movement coach, and I like to think and read about things. All right, Miguel, you want to introduce yourself?
Very simple.
Yeah.
My name is Miguel Aragoncillo. I'm based out of Boston right now. I work in a couple different places, but mainly Boston. And I'm also a coach, trainer, and I also like to think and read about stuff.
Okay. All right, man. What do you want to talk about?
Very simple.
Yep.
Well, besides everything,
Yeah.
I guess the big question that I had on the way here is it's a little timely with all the superhero movies and all these different things. So it's interesting because like growing up, I was super into the like cartoons and superhero kind of things like that.
Sure.
And it's interesting because we were talking about earlier off camera about relationships.
Sure.
And the relationship you have with yourself and how you use different mechanisms in order to, I guess, more or less survive. But, you know, as a 5-year-old not thinking about surviving.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, you know, from our personal discussions, something that I do is I try to, like, surround myself with a team, or at least I used to.
Sure.
And it kind of, like, makes me think more and more, like, it's more prevalent nowadays. Whether or not it's because of the nature of, you know, I guess the state of the world or whatever. But with relationships with superheroes and like the Avengers and all these different things, it's interesting because I think something that I'm drawn to is the concept of being a superhero or having the power or the thing, you know, and that's super big to just start off right away in terms of like being a coach and trainer. But like that's where my brain went to like as the most, you know, important question, because I think behavior wise, if I think as a 5-year-old and then a 10 and then a 15 and then a 20-year-old, it's still there.
Sure.
Subconsciously.
It doesn't stop.
Priming wise.
Sure.
It changes what you think of in terms of a day-to-day work, behaviors you do, and choose what your job's going to be.
Sure.
Like nobody think I'm going to be an accountant and be super awesome in life. You know, like, you know.
I'm so sorry for accountants out there.
Well, no, I mean, I used an accountant earlier this week. Like I needed to, otherwise I would be probably audited.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like, it's not really a question, but more a concept.
Yeah.
Like,
sure.
How does that thing as a child, what, you know, we could talk specifically about me or just in general. How that concept as a child being exposed to the need for a superhero or authority figure, how does that affect adults as you grow?
Yeah, that's a
Sorry
fun
for
question.
a 3-hour discussion.
No, that's excellent. But wait, so you know, it's interesting that you bring up you introduce this concept from the perspective of a child, right? Because that's like the most authentic version of this mechanism, right? Because this mechanism is not about conscious thoughts, right? Like you said, you know, like this mechanism, whatever this is, I'm about to dive into and break this thing half open. It directs a lot of your big life choices, right? It directs your career. It directs, you know, what you want to spend most of your time doing. Perhaps your hobbies. Perhaps the people that you want to spend your time with, right? Now, during your upbringing, during your like, you know, formative developmental years, you need authority. You need authority. That's not a, you know, question. That's not a discussion.
It's like a biological thing.
Correct. It's a biological need. Like right. There's no, you know. So, and so you form this bond, this relationship, right, with these authorities, right. And from an evolutionary standpoint, the normative development process includes authorities that have your best interest in mind. Okay, so when all of that is set in that, they make you feel safe, they provide for your needs, and they provide for you things that you don't know that you need, such as emotional bonding, right? It's like people. It's easy for people to think that kids need to be fed and they need to be watered.
Sure, yeah.
Right, they're fed water. Right, I'm not saying they're plants, so you just spray water on them. Right, right. But they need actually a third thing, which is emotional bonding, emotional nurturing, and support, and things like that. And we'll dive all more into like the definitions of those things. Like a lot of people think about that like kids need
something.
Right. They need something emotional.
They don't know what.
But exactly. Right. So the third thing a lot of times gets very, very neglected. Right. It gets very neglected because just people don't know. Right?
And it's also not quantifiable. Like,
well, yeah.
You know, like at its essence, like, all right, I fed you every day, and I see what you know what I'm saying. It's like how much emotional.
Right. It's much harder to quantify.
Yeah.
It's much harder to quantify. So, so when that isn't there, the brain, the mind, come up with natural defenses against that lack. Now, I use the word defense not as a protection or something like that against oncoming danger, right? But in the mind of a child, a young child, you know, like 1 through 6 perhaps, right? Which is whatever, a mind of an individual, the lack of something they need is a threat that you need to defend yourself against.
Again, biologically.
Sure.
Yeah,
right?
I get that.
So, because meaning if you're starving,
yeah,
you need a defense against starvation, which is shoving food in your mouth, right?
Sure.
Right. So, the lack of emotional bonding and emotional security is also a threat that you need to defend yourself against. So then, you know, it would be nice, or rather, let me back up a little bit. So when you're in that situation, in that you're a child, you're a little kid, you don't understand the world, you don't understand the world around you, and there's nobody there for you to anchor against, right? Because normative parenting would include the sense that you, the infant, you, the child, if you're with them, everything's going to be fine. And things that are not fine should be allowed to transpire to some degree. Meaning, let's say you're in elementary school, right, or kindergarten or whatever.
Yeah.
You go there and play with kids. Kids are a lot of times little assholes, or just don't know any better, right? So perhaps somebody says something mean to you. Another kid maybe says something mean to you, and you're really unhappy, and you're really sad.
Sure.
You come home. Your natural inclination, just from a neurological standpoint, is to seek comfort from your parents, right? From that perspective, from that experience of this little kid, your parents are omnipotent.
Right, and you talked about this before. I mean, referencing the last episode you did,
Right. So your parents have superpower, and they're also authority figures that is able to just evaporate sadness, fear, anxiety, or whatever.
Right.
You as a child don't understand how they do that. Therefore, as far as you're concerned, they have superpowers.
Right.
And in the mind of like a little kid, they don't understand. Right, exactly. It's magic. They don't understand that this is a superhero that they're looking at.
Yeah.
But when they see something like Superman, Spider-Man, whoever,
similar.
It's right. It's very similar.
Fuck.
It's very similar. That set of abilities that they don't understand.
It's clumped.
Right, precisely, and it makes them feel safe because if you don't feel validated, you don't feel safe, you don't feel, you're scared all the time.
Right.
It would be really nice if like Tony Stark showed up. Like
that'd be dope.
Right, that'd be awesome, right? Because all these characters are portrayed as people who inherently help others.
Right.
So then you have this realistic expectation that they would show up. They would
based on your past experiences, based on your
and based on your exposure to the content, meaning to comic books or cartoons or whatever. You then think that they're going to come help you. Right. And honestly, if they were real characters, they probably would. Right. Based on how they're portrayed. So, anyways, so that's why something like that is super important because it reflects our own need, or our unmet need. So the interesting thing about like psychological or psychic development is that if that is halted, right?
Halted.
Like meaning your need for emotional growth is not being facilitated by caregivers. Not being met. It will just stop there. Meaning, let's put it this way, right? So back to the kindergarten example, right? Kid gets somehow minorly traumatized at school, come home, seeking help.
Sure.
Parents are way too busy. Let's just be kind here. Parents are busy. Okay.
Right.
Both working 2 jobs.
Right.
And let's just say they're not home. Right?
Sure.
It's terrible, but it happens, right?
Yeah.
They're not home, right? So the kid come home freaks out, right? Come home freaked out. Come home really sad, a little bit depressed and stuff like that, right? And let's just say that never gets addressed, right?
It happens day after day.
Day after day, exactly.
Whatever.
Day after day for years and years and years, right? Let's just say for the rest of his life, right? Then he's unconscious, right? So that traumatic memory thing we were just talking about like before, about 9/11 and like JFK assassination for some people Pearl Harbor, like in memory science or in cognitive psychology, this is called light bulb memory. So this is called light bulb memory. And so the mechanism behind this is that your memory of the circumstances evaporate. You begin to forget how this happens, but you don't forget the memory of it. You don't forget the emotions of it.
Right.
You don't feel that. You don't remember.
You don't remember how it happened.
Right, but you don't forget the sadness and the pain and stuff like that.
Yeah, you remember the current events of it, like the current feelings.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that means
you don't remember the person calling your name, but you remember what it felt like.
Exactly. Right. So what this means is some part of you, right, for memory nerds out there, your working memory, don't stop trying to find a solution to this. It doesn't know when to stop because it has forgotten the fact that this this event is in the past. It has forgotten that it is in the past.
Yeah.
So it is always trying to cycle it in the it's being kept in the current.
Subconsciously current.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
You're not waking up thinking about it.
Right.
But because it's been so subconscious, your whole
another mechanism is keeping this in. Right. It's just like driving, right? I like using driving as an example. But like it's like driving in that now you've been driving a lot, right? So a lot of these controls, a lot of the finer, you don't have to think about it, right?
It just happens.
But obviously something inside of you is thinking about that. Otherwise, how could it be done, right? Right. Right. So it's the same thing, meaning something outside of your consciousness is working on this, right? But yeah. So. Yeah. So
some people call that chewing gum and talking or walking or
right. Exactly. Man, there's way more to this, but yeah, absolutely, right. So then they don't stop seeking parents.
Okay, yeah.
Right, in that little kid's example, you get
parents.
Right. You don't stop seeking a authority figure that has powers you don't understand to come help you. So
that's it, like.
Right.
Silence for like next 30 seconds. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't stop thinking that. You don't stop seeking that, and you won't know that you're seeking that.
Yeah.
Right. So and it's interesting, right? Like we've both, have like rough childhoods and stuff like that, right? And obviously, that's a huge part. I know it's a huge part of me, right? A huge part of my unconscious mechanisms to seek out a lot of things. Right. It got me here, right? Like I made a career out of like, being that, right? I'm now much more comfortable in saying that, like I'm like a movement superhero for people. Right. I, like the level that we're operating, a lot of the clientele that we see, like a lot of different professionals have failed them.
Sure.
Right. They get in front of us and kind of expect a miracle.
Right. Yeah.
Right, and we deliver.
Yeah.
Right, like for example, some kind of pain, some kind of dysfunction. Don't understand it. Nobody has explained it to them.
Yeah.
We solve it in 2 days or something like that. Right, like we are superheroes to these people.
I see where you're going. Yeah, I see where you're going.
Right, we have powers,
and that's kind of why I brought it up, because like I just know that it's not just a me thing.
Right.
It's not me seeking a superhero authority figure. Like I'm pretty sure it's prevalent across. Like how many people bought a ticket to Avengers?
Exactly.
And then that.
Right, it's a very common thing, and I think it's interesting in that a lot of different. Yeah, because like every culture has something like this, right? Every culture.
And it goes down like the list of like mythology and everything.
Exactly.
And it's just there, and I'm just like, there has to be something more about this.
Absolutely.
Like, why are we always trying to why do people lift weights?
Sure.
Like, sure, you want to be big, okay, I get it. Like, whatever.
Right.
But like, there has something to do with like this subconscious kind of like message that's being sent to you from when you were like 5.
Absolutely.
Or whatever age.
Absolutely. Right. So the thing is, Now I kind of have to introduce this concept of mirroring. Okay, so
Right, behavior, yeah.
right, so mirroring is what happens when the existence or the essence or whatever. No, let me not use scratch essence from the script. The existence of a person's mind or mental behavior characteristics
Sure.
is reflected in somebody else, and that only happens when you converse, when you authentically converse. Here's what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So I'm saying all this shit, right? And you're
Sure.
listening,
Right.
and I can see that you're clearly listening.
Yeah.
So that means a part of me is reflected in you through your listening,
Yeah.
right?
You mean you're like physical being, like you're literal, okay, physical, but then in here you're like in my brain still.
Correct.
I got you.
Right? And it's called mirroring because I can see that I am in there. I have a representation in your mind because you're listening to me. I can see that you're listening to me, and I can see that you understand what I'm saying.
Versus us talking to the dog.
Precisely. Well, dog's not a good example.
Sometimes.
Exactly, because they can
Sometimes.
reflect back too. They can let you know that you're
Cats.
listening.
Cats don't care.
Sure, like traumatized cats.
Okay,
Poorly
sorry.
treated cats,
Sorry.
right?
Anyway,
But like
I
talking
get
to a
what
wall,
you're saying.
talking to a wall,
I get what you're
or talking to someone who's clearly not listening.
Yeah.
Right? No mirrors, no mirroring, right?
Okay.
Right, and same thing with what I'm saying, because like I'm obviously responding to what you're saying, right? So we're mirroring each other. Mirroring,
And even if it's physical words, like me auditorily saying it, or like the nonverbal things you're getting.
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely, that's mirroring, right?
Right.
So, if we can be superheroes to other people, like whoever, like whoever you are, you're always a superhero to somebody in your life.
Yeah.
Right? You're always helping somebody. Right. And for the more traumatized people, you may be helping others in a dysfunctional way, but from your own subjective perspective, you are still helping them. And I'll dive into that in a little bit, right? But anyways, right? So when we are superheroing somebody else, when we're helping somebody else,
I like that as a verb now.
what? So superheroing?
Yeah.
Right here, first.
Urban Dictionary.
Right. So when we are helping somebody else,
Yeah.
the things that we're giving them, like safety, benign authority, right? Nurture, care, attention, affection, all those things gets reflected back to us. So it's a great way for people who are traumatized to obtain that, the thing that we never got.
Oh, okay. I was like, a Tim what? Yeah.
Yeah, as kids. Meaning, if we didn't have a competent parental figure, right? In that we didn't have this natural superhero figure that we're each sort of inherited through genetics.
Right.
If we didn't have that, we still need that. No matter what, you get it.
Right.
You come up with a way to obtain that. If it's not naturally given to you like it was supposed to, you're gonna make that. Right? You're gonna make that. So when people like us go into the healing arts and shit like that, healing sciences, it's a lot of times driven because of that. I know it is definitely the case for me.
Which
that I'm trying to get all these emotional needs met that was never met before.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying.
But yeah, like so that yeah, exactly. It's a crazy concept, and until somebody sits you down and like unpack this for you, you would just think
it's like this happened this time in your life. This happened this time in your life. This is now being reflected at this time in your life.
right, exactly.
Right.
It's like the trajectory of our mind, of our mental activities. It's always consistent. It's always consistent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that just keeps on going unless you see it. So it's like this, right? If you're in the tracks, if you're in the roller coaster and the roller coaster takes you whatever, if you don't realize you're in a roller coaster, you can't get out of it.
Say it again. If you don't realize you're in the roller coaster, you can't get out of it.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Think about it, right?
Right, because then you're like here, and then you're at the top.
Right. You just think that's where I go. That's what happens. Like imagine this, right? You're in the roller coaster, but from your perspective, you are not in a roller coaster. You're just
you
freely moving.
Right.
But you don't realize something is moving you along. You ain't doing shit.
Yeah, you have no frame of reference then.
Right.
Yeah.
So, for you to change that, right? You will need to somehow recognize that you are in a roller coaster. You will have to somehow recognize your unconscious patterns is moving you through life. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's some shit. Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
crazy.
Absolutely.
I think we could stop right now. We're done.
Right, I know. But like, back to the dysfunctional superheroing.
Yeah.
Right. For a lot of people, when they do antisocial things, when I say antisocial things, I'm talking about like being perhaps mean to people, being abusive to people, being
like antisocial. Just watching Netflix.
Right. No, that's actually very social.
Okay.
That's not antisocial at all, because you're still getting like social elements,
right?
Like social benefits of things, like because you're watching people interact. It's not the best way to do it, right? But it's a whole lot better than perhaps not listening to people, not responding to people when they're talking to you.
So shutting down part.
Correct.
The shutting down or the neglect or whatever those words are.
Right. Because that's then is anti-social.
So avoidance behavior, I guess, or something.
Correct. Avoidance behavior. That's actually anti-social. You not interacting with people, that's not anti-social. You're just not being social. Anti-social is in the negatives.
Right. I get that.
When you're not being social, you're just at a zero. Right. Anti-social, you're in the negatives. So anyways, so when people do that, that means whatever it is that they're doing. Let's say I interrupt you all the time. Whatever I can't even do it. I can't actually interrupt people, but like it's really hard for me to do that. But like, let's say you say something, right, and I cut you the fuck off, and I do that all the time, right. So that means somebody did that to me.
Because you've seen it in your past so many times.
Right, and that becomes a definition of relating.
Yeah.
Somebody implicitly taught you that that's how you relate to people. You interrupt them. Right, and they may not have said it to you.
Right.
But if some authority figure does that to you all the time, you as a child would think, oh, that's how people relate. All right, cool.
I get it.
Right. So
I've seen that.
Right, exactly. It was really common, right? It's really common. So that means that's their dysfunctional way of superheroing. They're still trying to do the same thing, right? Like whenever you
they're trying to get over here, but then like you just mentioned, this is the helpful, this is the neutral, and then this is
right.
But they're just gonna like somehow gonna go through a negative, view perspective.
Yeah. Or like we call it negative, right? But in reality, in terms of like
negative value. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you mean. Like in the minuses, right?
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Like, and another way of looking at the minuses, on the minus track.
Sure.
It's only minus. It's only problematic because most of society are trying to relate.
Okay.
Right. Meaning this would be a very normal thing to do if you were in a war zone. Meaning not relating to people because you don't know what's gonna happen. Right.
So it's kind of like when people like say you grew up in like a very like 6 brothers and like you all just like kind of made fun of each other and kind of like fight all the time, and that's how you kind of relate. Yeah. And then you try to bring that energy into the real world with other individuals, and it doesn't always work like that.
Exactly. You gotta adapt that a little bit.
Right.
And actually, that's a perfect example in that if
I've seen it so many times, like the athletes I work with, it's just like
absolutely. A lot of times that makes them good athletes, right? But a lot of times it does not make them very relating people or relatable people. Right. Because competition and like there needs to be a balance between competition and nurturing, competition and relating, whatever.
Fuck.
Yeah.
I've heard that phrase before, but
exactly. But yeah.
We can stop again.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. All right. What's next?
So I mean, it's all kind of tangential because I feel like that is like a really good kind of perspective. Like if I ask that to somebody in the get-go, like what things in your life cause you to get to here?
Sure.
It's like nobody would have a conscious idea or cognitive idea why that is.
Sure.
But they're here anyway.
Right.
Here meaning like with you.
Yeah.
As a initial concept.
Sure.
But like that'll just blend into so many other aspects of like
a lot of things.
Then you could say like your behavior. Psychological behavior causes a motoric output behavior.
Absolutely.
And then, you can go down so many different rabbit holes, which is, I mean, I feel like those are the easy questions to ask, like the movement. Like, I don't want to say that's the easy question to ask, but it's
less complex.
It's not as complex. It's not as many like, Jenga puzzles or pieces to that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that is, because that seems like the behavior side of it can explain so many other pieces.
Absolutely.
And not it explains those pieces in not so fanciful of a way.
Right. It's very related.
Because like all you gotta do is just like look it up.
Right. Right. Exactly. It's very grounding.
Yeah.
It's very, very grounding.
It's like, well, you don't believe me that this? Like, okay, then why are you lifting so much weight when you're 48?
When you really don't, exactly. When you really don't need to.
Like, you can if you want to. Like, there's definitely health benefits, for sure.
Right.
But it's like, do you need to be lifting 900 pounds?
Right, exactly.
Like,
why is this the healthy thing that you're choosing to do? Why are you not eating better? Why are you not whatever, right? Any number of things. Why is this the way, right? Why does this attract you here, right? Right, because it's something in your unconscious, unconscious model, internal model that told you, the conscious self, hey, want this. Because people, when they think they want something, so first of all, like one of the like driving questions of like the cognitive sciences, meaning like both psychology and psychoanalysis, is that the myth of people thinking they have transparent access to their minds, meaning their entire mind is transparent to them, to their own internal investigation.
To the individual.
Yeah, to the individual.
Like, my mind, I can't figure it out. Is that what you're saying?
No. The myth is that I can figure out whatever it is I want. Right. And in reality, it's not the case, right? Like, like I said last time, it's like people think that there's their consciousness, right, and everything else revolves around them. That's already a
direct reflection.
No. That's already like a relatively contemporary concept, right? What they used to think is, here's my consciousness. And contained within this ball is all of my mind, right? And that there's nothing else in my mind other than what I can consciously access, which is like, when we hear something like this, it's like, whatever, right? That's not even anywhere near the truth, right? But like, a lot of people automatically think that, right? Like a lot of people automatically think that. So then, when you see something. When you perceive something, not necessarily just with your eyes, when you touch something too, when you perceive something, there's your conscious experience of it, right? And then there's like, all of your unconscious mechanisms that are also working with this, right? Because think about it, right? You can think about what you see, right? Things you see, things you touch, things you hear, right? But you can't break that apart from a sensory perspective, meaning, say you see the shape of this mic, right?
Sure.
You see the shape of this mic. You can't actually feel at what point did these lines, this color, this shape, this shade became microphone, right?
It's like, at what point is this a mic and what point is it not a mic?
Correct. Right. I mean, you can analyze that like cognitively from data and stuff like that. You can like, write it out and you can logically talk about that. But you cannot. You exactly. You can math it, right? But you can't feel that.
Nope.
Right.
Until you physically like move or manipulate.
Exactly. You don't have access to that.
Right.
That's unconscious.
Right.
That is a unconscious mechanism.
Right.
Same thing with motor patterns. We talk about motor patterns all the time, right? Like same thing with motor patterns. You don't have access to that, right?
Right.
You will need some other way to modify that.
Right.
Right. So it's like, when people first learn, when we first learn coaching, it's like, how coaching is taught under the assumption that movement is conscious. Right. It's like. Right, it's like that's hilarious. That's just hilarious.
It's funny the things that I can, not make people do. I'm not manipulating them, but like allow people to access.
Exactly, just open doors, right?
It's crazy,
right? It's opening doors in the neocortex, opening doors in the motor system, in predictions and stuff like that, right?
So, all right, I don't know if you're gonna keep on going. Like,
no, like just like one more. So like it's these systems, these unconscious models and these unconscious systems that directly produce what goes on in your conscious.
Say that again.
It's these unconscious models and mechanisms that produce what you experience in the conscious.
Yeah.
Because we think it's the other way around. No, it's like pretty much never the other way around.
Right. I get it.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
With respect to that.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing I do. Right. Okay, so to go off of that. Some words that I'm just gonna throw out and then I'm gonna bring it back.
Sure.
I could always use a good refresher on how feedback feed forward mechanisms can alter movement outputs.
Yeah.
I I want to talk about subconscious and consciousness, like we already did a little bit, but but with respect to certain things that are very quick athletically. Like, it's funny because the more I dive into these topics on neurophysiological level, the mechanisms that allow an individual to move quickly, you can't bring it to cognition. And by going through so many different like avenues, right? Like, I'm sure you know where I'm going, but like we did the constraints-led approach and dynamics, this and that, and like those are all largely subconscious in my opinion. But those guys miss a boat also, and then that's kind of where I want to go. Like, how can we elicit the subconsciousness? And maybe you need to take 10 steps back in order to go 100 steps forward. What? Okay, so that's that. And then I guess, well, I mean, those are like two different questions. I guess I'll start with that then. You know, the forward feedback.
So hand me
all the books.
Hand me mode control. Hand me constraints led.
Constraints led.
Yeah, the top one.
Oh, this one.
Yeah.
Oh, this is dynamic.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't the same thing. Right, so all the stuff that I'm about to talk about are kind of like my expansion and my interpretation of these two books, right? And there are other seminal texts in related topics, right? But like Miguel was saying, these two works, and all their wonderful authors, they're diving into data that reflects the workings of the unconscious, right? Like, because I think a lot of people, when they hear the word unconscious, it's natural for us to think that it's just some part of me, right? Some part of me that I don't understand, or some part of me that is like out of my control.
Like you're sleeping.
Or something like that. Exactly, kind of like a dream, right? When they say unconscious, it's very like ethereal, right? It's very mystical or some shit like that.
Right, you can't grasp it.
Right.
And it's super cool. Like, I just quick.
Yeah.
I mentioned, I might have texted you maybe a couple weeks ago.
Sure.
I don't know if you remember, where I was texting you like, I keep on having dreams where I'm literally troubleshooting whatever. Like I vividly remember one time there was I was in a building, super tall skyscraper. The top floor was on fire, the bottom floors were on fire, and I was like, all right, how do I get out of it?
Sure.
And I wasn't scared. I was like, all right, time to figure it out. Another time was like, there's like a flood. Same thing. It's like, all right, how do I get on a boat and whatever?
Exactly.
I was excited to like. Right. I was like, I gotta get sleep. I want to.
Yeah.
It was weird. I don't know.
That's really awesome. But yeah, so it is like people think of the unconscious like that, right? And it's interesting because.
And I was controlling the dreams too.
Right.
That was the weird part.
Yeah.
That's why I was excited, because I was like, I know I can control the dream.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. One day we'll talk about diving into like dream interpretations.
It's like another 5 hours later.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so a lot of people think of the unconscious in that way, right? Because like it's not common to talk about the unconscious as a mechanical thing,
sure,
right? But then again, there's obvious mechanics into it, right? So because and one more thing I want to sort of caveat onto is that, like, this is what happens when the controlled is trying to view the controlling mechanism as if is a part of its own control. Meaning, let's say you're like, this thing is being controlled by this thing, right?
Sure.
So if this, and that's just the reality of the situation, right? So if he views this guy, if this guy views this guy, under the assumption that he is in his control, then it won't make sense. It will be like a dream. It will. Right, it will be something that it doesn't understand because he doesn't control him. That's I think one of the things that happens when a lot of people look at think about their unconscious, because you're trying to control it, right? No, that motherfucker controls you.
It's crazy because like the things that you're controlling essentially are, I mean, you're not in control, so you can't physically control it.
No, you can't. You have to work with it.
Right. Oh man,
you got to work with it.
What was it? I don't know if Bruce Lee said it or somebody said it, something about guiding a moving river. It's like you can't tell the water where to go, but you can control the boundaries around it.
Correct. You can make it understand certain things, right? There's certain There's certain boundaries that you cannot violate. Right.
Yeah, I'm sure you're gonna go into that.
Right. Right. So, wait a minute. What was the question?
Yeah, that said a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just gonna cut this out.
So there's two of them. Feedback, feed forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So feedback and feed forward, right? So very very fucking interesting. Feed forward is simply your unconscious mechanisms, right? And so in these books, and these guys talk about feed forward as a feed forward motor mechanism, right? There's feed forward for everything.
Okay.
And the word everything I use here with the maximal potential for emphasizing everything. Like there's a feed forward mechanism for everything, right? And I'll dive into some examples of this crazy shit, right?
I'm just sitting there, like, okay. I'm waiting.
Yeah, just getting ready. So feedback. No, hold on, back up. So then feed forward is just a constructed model of not a sequence, but it's a if then, meaning I don't know, like baseball is a big part of what you do, right? So like
if like driving analogies, I mean that makes sense.
Yes, right. So if a ball flies at you at a certain speed, right, your feed forward mechanism is gonna be like, oh, if that ball is flying at me from this trajectory, then I need to do this. Right. You don't think about it.
It just happens.
It just happens. Well, all you gotta do is recognize that that's a ball coming,
right?
And that you are a baseball player, and it happens. You barely think about it, right? It's just like what you're saying, like certain ballistic movements, you can't like do that, right? You can't like consciously control it,
right?
Like you may be able to control the initiation of it, but if you try to actually control it, a lot of times it won't work very well.
Yeah.
Get that. So feedback, because a lot of people think feedback is like. A lot of people think feedback is like you get information into your brain, either visual, auditory, or somatosensory, and then you do something with the decision. Right? No, you don't do shit. Right? You don't do shit. Like you just make sure the information gets there. Once it gets there, the feed forward model does something with the feedback, because feedback is an update, right? There's no such thing as feedback in an independent manner,
right? When they explain it in the mechanism, that means you need to understand it, so that's why they explain it in a separated fashion,
right? For analysis,
right?
As a theorist, right? These books are kind of they're not there to explain to you like what you could do. It's just what happens. So you, as a theorist, you can come up with more grounded, more practically applicable models. Of like coaching and shit like that, right? Meaning, if you just take the content of here and you bring it to like the gym or stuff like that, it won't make sense. You need a translator, right? You need it could be you, right? But anyways, you need to translate whatever's fuck's here into application.
That's the hard part that nobody gets.
Right. Because a lot of people don't understand that that's necessary. Right. So it's meaning. If I read cover to cover and then I apply this to the gym and it doesn't work, well, this book obviously is bullshit. Right. It does exactly. It doesn't work. Or POI doesn't work. FMS doesn't work. Whatever doesn't work. Right. Anyways, so the feedback is there to update the feed forward model.
Yeah.
Right. So which is another way of saying, if your feed forward model is perfect, there's no feedback.
Because there's no room for calibration.
There's no need for there's no discrepancy.
Or there's no change in the environment.
Correct. Compared to what you predict it to be. So then there's no feedback. Feedback's only existence where there's a discrepancy.
So you need more exposures in order to get. So here's the interest. Okay. So when you have a different feed forward, not different. When you have a feed forward model, or however the words are, like. A feed forward thing in your brain allows you to update whatever that thing is, and we already know what it is, but I'm just using general words. That will allow an individual to have a more refined feed forward mechanism for later exposures and experiences. Is this making?
It does make sense, right? But it doesn't. But so here's what I mean.
Okay, yeah, right.
So you like, let's just pretend you're immortal. Okay. Right. And the whole universe, the entire, you're immortal, so you can't die. You don't need food. You don't need air. Okay.
Cool.
And you don't need shit. You don't need any of that. You just as you are will live forever. Okay. Just go with it, people. And in the whole universe, there are just four things. There's you. There's a baseball bat. There's a ball, and then there's an entity that throws the ball at you.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, 5 things, and then there's a fifth thing that gets the ball back to the first entity.
Sure.
Okay, that's all there is in the universe.
Right.
Okay, and you keep doing this
Back
thing,
and forth, right?
right? Keep doing that, and let's say after like 10 years,
Sure.
because 10 years of like continuously doing this,
Sure.
your batting becomes perfect.
You're an expert.
You're an expert. Like in that your prediction model or your feed-forward model for batting is, just accounting for all variations of the ball coming at you.
Sure.
Okay, let's just say that, right? Then after that, there's no more need. One, there's no more need to change that prediction model. Second, it becomes impossible to change the prediction model because there's no need for it. You're not going to have discrepancy.
Because you've done all variations of it.
Right. You don't have enough input from reality to change the feed-forward model. So back to
this is your reality.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. So back to your example, right? You can't build a model for future events, for future variations, if the variations had not happened.
Right.
You will need to modify this in some way to potentially account for that. So you could do that, but without changing the event, that's not possible to change the model. Yeah.
Again, we could stop. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because like I don't know, I guess the things that are just popping off in my head are like the things that I've done for people.
Yeah.
Like you would change in this case, if you're working with pitchers, you would change how you stride. You would change how you rotate. You would change the slot of the arm when you throw, and you would change the height of the individual that you're throwing to, because then that would affect where you throw it on that subconscious perspective. And you do how many variations? At 4 or 5, and then you just like combine all these different variations, and then the next set is a different set of variations, and then you keep on going over and over, and then you have your variables. Yeah. And then you just get better.
Right. So, I think that's a really really good point. That's brought some of the shit from me. Like, you're talking about like 4 or 5 variations, right, of this drill. Let's just say 4 and 5. You say a lot more, but let's say 4 or 5, right? 5. Let's just say 5, like 5.
Sure.
Right. Let's just say 5, right? At first, you develop feed-forward model for each of the 5, right?
Sure. right.
And then as you cycle, the 5 becomes 1.
Ooh.
Becomes a bigger, macroscopic or more macroscopic model.
Yeah.
Because that sequence is now a act.
Yeah, it's like it's unified.
Right. Meaning, at first there's 5 models, right? Variation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then let's say you do I forgot the name of the shit where it's like you just do this in same sequence, right? And then this sequence slowly becomes a model itself. Meaning this model consists of 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. Right. And if you change this, it's this different model at this level.
Yep.
Right. And then it becomes 5, 3, 2.
Is it like permutations or a combination or something like that?
Right. Yep. But that's a different model now.
Right.
So then you just keep on going. That allows you to solidify more of each of the 5. Right. It's almost like looking at something from a different perspective. Then you have a clearer picture of what the thing is.
Because that frame of reference is now updated.
Right.
And then
it's like from a different angle. But even though it's the same thing. Right. Because the 5 are still the 5, right? It's just that the different combinations are different perspectives.
I just saw some crazy shit, like let's do it upside down now, like
right. Exactly. So long as the 5 don't get modified too much, you will still be doing and refining the same things.
Right.
Which is also why in that crazy universe immortal example, you can't do that because there's no variations. But it also means you'll be perfect.
There's only one.
There's no variation.
Wow. And that
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And then we can apply that not just baseball, but if
you can apply
the gym,
anything.
It's like deadlift variations. Like, all right, let's go through that game.
Right.
And then, you know, all those different variations of all. And on top of that, now we could even, so that's a I feel like that's macro.
Sure, yeah.
You know, like you're going to drive. It's like driving here is going to be really similar to driving in the UK. You're just on the other side of the road. Like you understand the mechanisms.
Yeah.
Now, when we talk micro, now we can get like this and then even more micro of like joint kinematics of like.
Absolutely.
Now you can start talking about like PRI, like, and all these different variations of that.
Absolutely.
Of the positions, the, you know, F on A on F, that kind of thing, and you can just keep on going down that microscopic kind of perspective.
Right, absolutely, because you know, like these. So one like consistent theme is consistency.
Sure.
No matter what you do, some things got to be consistent within the variations.
Yep.
Right.
Right, like in baseball, where like at some point this ball is going to go from here to over here.
Right.
At some point.
Right. In some way, that doesn't change.
Right.
And if you're a batter, your job doesn't change fundamentally.
Function.
Right. Exactly. Your function does not change. So the function of these combos, these perspectives, doesn't change because they are trying to deliver 1 through 5, right? That doesn't change. 1 through 5 doesn't change. That's the thing that holds over these two, right?
That's big.
But why? What were we talking?
Feedback.
Yeah. PRI. So AF and FA mechanisms, you know, like a lot of different drills, you do it supine, prone, side lying, upside down, whatever, right? Underwater, dead. But the hip action doesn't change, right? Doesn't change. But because the rest of the body is going through a lot of different changes, right? That's the perspective. That's the different perspective to look at hip kinematics or kinetics. Right. So again, something has to hold you over between different variations.
Hold you over?
Right. Like something has to be carried over.
Okay.
Right. Between
like transfer kind of.
Right. So that your unconscious, your motor patterns, your V4 models can recognize that this is just different permeations of the same thing. Because otherwise it just becomes different tasks.
They're separated.
Right.
Which is it's erroneous to think that.
Right.
Because
I think that's what happens when people have variation for variance's sake.
And that's just like why?
Exactly. It's no longer the same thing, or rather, you're like you may be able to make the argument, verbal argument, that it's the same thing, but the motor center won't think of that as the same thing. Your V4 models won't think of it as the same thing. Right. Oh, actually, for those of you that's itching to like get into this thing, there's a third book you're going to want to read on top of this. Otherwise, this is not going to be enough context for you to translate this into practice. Right? So on the market right now, there are 2 books on the cerebellum. Okay. There's one written by this gentleman called Masao Ito. Stay the fuck away from that book. That will kill you. The only other book, I forgot the lady's name, but she's an eminent neuroscientist. Read that one instead. Okay, that is designed for humans. This is designed for just meta-human people with crazy brains. Okay, like I didn't read it. You shouldn't. Hence your life. So you get done with this book first, written by I forgot her name. Anyways, and then if you are so inclined, come over here. Right.
Do you know the name of the first book?
Cerebellum. They're both titled. It doesn't help. They're both titled Cerebellum.
I love that. I love that the one title names memory.
Yeah.
Cerebellum.
Exactly. Yeah. There's no confusion.
If there was a book called Science, it'd be like.
Right.
It would just keep on.
Yeah. It would just be a computer. You would just be handy a fucking computer.
There you go. From the future.
Yeah.
All right. So going off of that into we were talking earlier about representation of space.
Sure.
And I think at least some people might like the idea of talking about the mechanics, right?
Sure.
Mechanisms of like A on F, F on A, and then how it represents neurologically.
Yeah.
Because I think that's super important for people to kind of like understand. So just saying, that's what I want to talk about. It's not separated. Like you're gonna do this exercise, whether or not you're calling it hip shift or pull back, whatever. And then you're gonna do a separate exercise over here, and then you can do a separate exercise over here. But in reality, like if you just like go like this,
It's
you
the same
start
thing.
with the foundation of this A on F activity, and then you just change the position, and then you change maybe the temporal aspect, and then you just keep on going from there.
Sure.
So I don't know if you want to talk about the representation of space. And
Of course I do. Of course I do.
So lay that down for you.
Yeah. So we have a guest now.
Hey,
Hi.
Boone.
Hi.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. So we have to talk about reference frames, right? We have to talk about reference frames if we're talking about space, right? Because a system cannot analyze space from nowhere. You have to have a perspective.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
I mean, I'm here.
Right. You have to analyze space from a starting point, from a vantage point.
Right. Okay.
And the brain does the same thing with that. So there are a handful of references. Okay. So for all your external systems, meaning visual, vestibular, auditory, you have what they called a head-centric reference frame. Because these systems,
even that way you just phrased it. All right, go ahead, sorry.
So these systems view whatever.
Is there a pelvis-centric frame?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, of course there is. Right. So these systems view reality, or the portions of reality that they detect, from the head,
right?
Because you don't have eyes anywhere else,
right?
You
don't know that.
You know, you learn something every day. Right. But yeah, so the vantage point of your visual system is through here, right? And they are not able to understand or process information from other places, right? Not directly, anyways, right? Because you can obviously imagine what the world would look like if your eyes were here. What you would need to, cognitively manipulate that concept in your mind, right?
Right. Yeah,
but you will never experience this, right? You will never experience that.
Crazy,
right? Same thing with your ears, and same thing with your vestibular system, right? Like everyone has at some point in their lives, like
right.
Done that, right?
For sure.
Your vestibular system does that because it's only worried about how gravity affects your head. Your vestibular system doesn't give two fucks about how gravity affects other parts of you.
Huh.
Because you have no vestibular organs anywhere else.
Sure. I get that.
Right. So,
somebody told me that.
Right. It's like, yeah, exactly. You learn this in school.
So something.
Yeah, but it's simple, right? So, same thing with like your auditory senses.
Okay.
Right. So, anyways, so these external sensors are operating out of a head-centric reference frame, right? When we coach, right, like especially like a squat or a deadlift, some kind of level change activity. People who rely on their eyes, well, what do? When they come out of a hole, they do this, right? Because their system is trying to lift the head out of the hole. They're not trying to lift the torso out of the hole. Therefore, that's all that matters. So they've compromised their torso position. That's fine from their perspective, from perspective of the visual system, because they're using that as a guide.
So, okay, and I appreciate everything. I just want to slow that down for like one.
Yeah.
No, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
I just don't know if everybody else.
Yeah. No.
So, just for my frame of reference, if somebody's coming out of the hole or bottom position of whatever it is, and I'm I did this for so many years too. Yeah. Right. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Like when you come out of a deadlift, you're like doing like this.
Yeah.
And mechanically, individuals, even like Latosh would say something like, "This is the equilibrium point," or whatever other words, where it's like this is the one point, and then now you start to move, and there's so many variations of that.
Sure.
But now you add a neurological layer on top of the mechanisms, and then that head-centric frame of reference or perspective is, that's just game changing.
Yeah.
Because now, if we can have that, now we can begin to understand which of those can we start to identify. Maybe something's at a deficit. Maybe something's not getting enough love.
Sure.
Or maybe something's taking too much dominance.
Sure.
And then you start to feed that.
Right.
Or you take it away so the other senses take over, or whatever.
Right. So no, it's an awesome point, right? Like, no, it's an awesome point. People are gonna die now. So
I assume they already are work.
That's it. That's a good point. So as you're coming out, if you're doing this, right, your neocortex is not working a whole lot when you're doing this.
That's fact.
Right. So your motor system is not actually working.
Huh.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Right. Your motor system is not actually working when this happens. This is a reflex. This is a neurological reflex. This is a combination of vestibulo-ocular reflex and a vestibular-colloid reflex and a vestibular-spinal reflex.
I get it.
Right? So technically, when that happens, you are falling.
I felt a lot then.
Yeah. Right. Technically, when you
right now.
right, you remember, yeah. Right. So when you come out and you do this, you are technically falling. Here's what I mean. Right. So these vestibular-based reflexes kick on when your motor planning is no longer accounting for gravity. When they are no longer effectively managing or fighting gravity, these vestibular reflexes kick on. Right, because your vestibular organs, they're very sensitive to the orientation of your head, obviously, and the speed at which it's moving. So
I get it.
Right.
Because the reflexes are, I don't even know if they're, would you classify them as subconscious? They're like the reflexes.
They're inherently unconscious.
Okay.
They're inherently unconscious. Right. So, which means, like, they're always gonna try to get your head to be, like this leveled. Right.
Like when somebody does a side plank, they always do like the weird
or
some variation.
Yeah. And the reason why when you fall asleep in class you do this is because your vestibular system detects that you have a cant, right? You have a tilt in your head, right? And
it's a level for you,
right? It's then gonna kick on, or rather, your vestibular nuclei, which is in your brainstem, not in your neocortex, has direct access to your spinal extensors. So when they detect that you have tilted,
that's wild.
They without the need to send signals to the brain, they directly process that signal and kick on neck extensors to have you do this. And then since you're still asleep, you want to be here, and then you do that. Right. The fact that you can sleep through this means your neocortex is not involved.
That's like every plane, every train ride. That's more.
Right. Exactly. That means the neocortex is not involved. So that it's a reflex.
If it's not involved, then exactly.
Right. So right. That's what happens when you tilt. Right. So when you're in the bottom, you are also tilted. So if you feed that, then your motor system is not actually involved. When I say your motor system, I'm talking about tertiary motor area, secondary motor area, primary motor area, cerebellum, and all the sensory stuff that comes with it, like your sensory cortex.
So you're lifting with your vestibular.
You're lifting with your vestibular system. Right.
I got a pretty strong vestibular system.
You got a pretty legit vestibular system, like, which is a really powerlifting thing, right? Yeah, it's a really powerlifting thing, right? So the effectors are the same. Like the executioners are the same, which is your muscles, right? But who's telling the muscles to do shit? Completely different. It looks the same,
right?
Until you learn this shit.
It goes to the end, and then that's not the motor system.
Right.
Wow.
Like, so for your brave explorers out there, if you want to learn more about this, there's this book simply titled "The Vestibular System." It's like the vestibular system, the sixth sense. Right. Good luck. Anyways,
that's on my list.
Yeah. It's like a 700-page neuroscience textbook just on the vestibular system, talking about shit like this. Right. This is not for the faint of heart. You should have a decent understanding of neuroscience, not neuroanatomy, neuroscience, before you get to this book.
If you're watching this, I don't think you're faint of heart.
That's a good point. That's
like if you've watched every Avengers kind of like Marvel comic universe, even that, you know what's cool? The things movies have done. I'm bringing this full circle.
Yeah.
The movies have allowed the general individual to understand the Marvel comic universe.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I'm sure MCU is like, nah, you guys are just fucking whatever.
So then your vestibular system is getting you away from the ground, right? Which is why you can forego trunk stability, right? Then your spinal extensors just do all the work. So you are not actually traversing through space. Your nervous system meaning your vestibular system, is just trying to get you back up to here. You're not going up. Does that make sense?
Yo, no, that makes perfect sense. I get it.
Because
I just haven't had somebody answer that in that way.
Right.
And I'm going to layer it back with the other question.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, you mentioned there's feed-forward mechanisms for everything.
Right.
So does that mean your vestibular system is just being more and more reinforced?
Yes, because they have a learning potential. Meaning the vestibular system itself, the vestibular nuclei.
On a neurological level.
Right. They have learning potential. They have they're plastic as well, meaning they're able to change and hold on to the change. So then, and the other thing is your tertiary motor system or your prefrontal cortex. They are gonna then rely on vestibular system to get things going.
Right.
So by a functional definition, you are not raising, you are not moving. You are going from falling to not falling. You are not going down and then up. Because your equilibrium points are not changing.
Right. And for those who like DNS, the punctum fixum is not changing either. It's just like that.
Absolutely. Right. And there's no stabilization. Because you're just unfalling.
What a good phrase.
Right.
Oh my god. I could just pontificate on that whole idea there for a while.
Right.
Okay, so to unravel this, all right, you're going from falling to unfalling.
Right. So let me.
How can you?
Right.
How can you unfuck yourself?
So let me define this further, right? Because this is not the full picture just yet. This is just a big piece of it. So for you to authentically go down, right? Your prediction models, your feed-forward models, needs to account for the fact that you are going down, and set up a series of equilibrium points for you to hit. Of falling, of going down, not falling, of controlled descent. Descent and falling are different. Right, falling is just gravity yanking you. Right, descent is you going down there while being in control. Right, which requires your motor system to plan out what every muscle is going to be doing. Whereas if you do this, there's just one strand of like your erector spinae, and that's it for the most part. Which is why all this shit is like relaxed, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, so then that system, because the control structure operates out of a head-centric reference frame, the rest of the body does not exist.
So it's like you're just a floating head.
You're literally a floating head with a bar towing behind. And you're just getting this floating head up. The rest of the body does not exist. So the cerebellum and its models and your motor system and its models, they are operating out of a body-centric reference frame. So then all of this exists.
Trying to.
No, they are.
Okay.
Right. When they turn on, they are doing that.
Okay, so when you turn on, all right.
Right.
So processing the shit you just said.
So, right. So which means if your brain goes over sensory motor transformation of like descend and then ascend,
right, now you got there,
then you are not falling. You got there, exactly like you said. You got there. Gravity did not drag you down there. Right. You got there, so you are not falling now. Whereas if that is disengaged and your vestibular system is holding you up, then technically you're still going through falling and unfalling process. You have not held on to anything yet. Right. So yeah, this is hard to describe. You need the vestibular book and you need the cerebellum to understand.
Or just replay that last whatever amount of time, like about 10 times.
Right. But yeah, so you know, if you don't have conscious perception, not conscious control necessarily, conscious perception of all of your anti-gravitational muscles other than your back.
So feeling them.
Correct. Sensing that they work.
Right.
Sensing that they work in a manner that is matching your height. Your height in that moment. Like as you're coming out of the hole, certain things should be working harder and harder, and certain things should be, working less and less or whatever.
Sure.
Rather than just back extensors locked, and then that gets you up.
Right. And that's it's just like that's a topic that could be, I mean, like whether or not this thing goes viral now, that's not my concern.
Right.
What I'm saying is so many, and I know just a little bit more about it because that's how I grew into the industry. I just like followed individuals that said something like that.
Right.
And then we learned to get neutral, and then we learned to get this, and we learned to get that. But on a neurological level, falling and unfalling, people are still relatively not in the context. They still don't know the concepts. Excuse me, of the conscious control aspect while level changing.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because they're not accounting for it, right? You don't have to experience failing of that.
Right.
Whereas, like, if you use the vestibular system, that shit will get you up.
And then you're gonna definitely feel it the next day, not in a bad way, but you're gonna be like, yo, Mike, something is fatigued.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. This is fucking massive.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I want to build on that, and so something not as dramatic and extreme like powerlifting, then something as simple as like one thing that I've seen quite a bit from everybody who follows or talks with you. We go through like the one leg RDLs or hip hinges, whatever the phrase everyone wants to use. But something that's super interesting is I don't see like the good benefit here is of being a distance away from I guess you is I get to experiment my own. That I just text you and like just figure it out. Instead of just like what do you do and then try to take it. What do you do? Right. I get to like have like 3 months benefit of like I've been playing with this.
Yeah.
So the way that I literally just taught like maybe a couple hours ago.
Absolutely.
A single leg deadlift, right? I said here's a series like they were in an open gym. There was med balls, plates, and pick up something. Like I was very general and vague. It's like pick up whatever you want to pick up, and hold it in whatever hand you want to hold, and then try to do this movement. Where you feel the same muscles that we felt. We went over adductor pullback. It's like feel the same muscles and just move through it. Just see what you got. And they first initially were very unclear as to what I said because I was obviously unclear.
Oh yeah.
And then I was like, okay, just go through 3 repetitions of something like this. Change your position or hand position or whatever position. Go to another, and then go through another. And that's kind of like the working model of what I've been doing for teaching that in a standing manner. Yeah. I don't know if there's any refinement or anything I can do differently or better.
No, that's perfect because like the refinement is upon them.
Okay. Well, I'm saying initial conditions.
Oh no, I think it's great. That's open. That's open-ended enough, right? I mean, like the only consideration you gotta have is like if people are not comfortable with that, because that will scare the dog shit out of some people,
right?
People,
right. I've done that, and they're like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" I'm like, "All right, we're not gonna do
that." Exactly. They will get angry,
right?
Because it is a threat to them.
Right. It's so unclear.
Yeah. Right. They're not comfortable enough with that. It feels very scary to them.
Right.
But some people fucking love it, right? Some people
they get to play.
Yeah, exactly. They get to play, right? Some people love it, but other people don't want to be wrong because they still think they're right and wrong.
Right, and then they always get like for every exercise, everyone's like, if you're familiar with like what a lunge looks like from previous experience with other trainers or coaches or therapists, or anything, bench press, dumbbell, whatever. Sure. And you have your own variations on that. Right. But conceptually, it's super interesting because people say, "Am I doing this right?" That's a question I'm sure you probably had yesterday.
Yeah, very.
Am I doing this right? And then I'm like, does it like are you hurting yourself?
Sure, exactly.
Like that simple question. And I don't mean to be super general of like you figure it out. Like I don't want anybody to hurt themselves. Right. But what I mean by am I doing this right? Yeah. That kind of questioning. Yeah. If I give them the feedback, they're gonna begin to become dependent. Right. Whether or not they need that. Sometimes, maybe they do. Sure. And then there's other times when they need to have their own feedback mechanisms. Like we just mentioned, at some point the ball needs to go from point A to point B. When you do the dumbbell floor press, at some point you need to start up here, then you need to go down here. That's the right. For the single leg deadlift in this case, it's always about the other leg. It's like, do I put the foot down? What do I do with the other leg? So I don't know if you have any comments on
I see what you mean.
Are you doing it right? Or...
Yeah. Like how much control you should have over their process of doing this, right? Yeah. Right. So, I think this day and age, a lot of people that talk about one's relationship with themselves and things like that, they want just essentially they're advocating for the maximum degree of independence.
Right, because we got to swing with everything that's happening nowadays.
Yeah. You just could be your own person, right? And that is a misrepresentation of the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation being what the mind and the brain does with respect to something like that, right? So it's really, really, it's impossible for this neurological system to come up with something new without references. So let me put it this way, right? If you leave a baby alone, and this is like baby day one, just popped out, right?
Pops up fresh,
like
still
like like slimy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You know, you understand.
So, and you don't teach the baby anything, and you deprive this baby of sensory input. The baby will not spontaneously produce any function.
It's like, oh, it's good. We just walk in and talking.
Yeah, no, it's not. In fact, like studies
the opposite.
have shown they will die. They will die. If you feed them and water them, they will die.
Right.
Anyways. So what I'm trying to say is, independence is a bit of a myth. Here's what I mean. Right? If this person has never lifted and never picked up anything from the ground, right? If this person has never picked up anything that is below like arm level, let's just such magical person exists, right? They've never had to pick up anything, so they have no idea which is the natural hinging pattern, right?
Yep.
Right, because that's obviously required for you to pick up anything, right?
The concept.
Right. So you would have to demonstrate that to them first. You would have to essentially take full control over how they hinge first, because they have no concept of hinging, right? So somebody, you in this case, needs to put that feed-forward model in a complete feedback manner into their mind. What I mean by that is, because at this moment they have no feed-forward model for the hinge, right?
Right, it's not there.
Right, it's not there. So you gotta give all of the feedback to them that would otherwise consist a hinging pattern. Does that make sense? Right? So then, at first, you just build that. And they will be completely dependent upon you, right? You just completely build that. Once that dependency is something they master, meaning they master the dependency on you,
right?
Then you can start introducing independence. Because otherwise you can't do that.
Makes sense,
right? It's like, working with somebody who doesn't know how to walk, right?
Say again?
Working with somebody who does not know how to walk,
correct?
Who cannot walk, right?
I know several.
Right.
I'm serious.
Right. Yeah, it's absolutely right. At some point, you're gonna have to hold him.
Right.
Are you gonna tell him to behave? Hey man, independence. No, he ain't ready for it. Right, and then right.
Right.
No, he's not ready for it.
Right.
What you're gonna do is you're gonna hold him every fucking time,
right?
Until they demonstrate that
it happens.
That maybe there's a chance now, and then you let go only a little bit, but you still hold on most of the time.
Training wheels.
Right, exactly, and then the needle slowly goes back the way towards independence. If there's a dependence, independence, right? When they first demonstrate just a sliver of independence, you just pull it back a little bit, and then a long time later they're here.
Right, because sometimes we're gonna come back.
Exactly. So it's
they
not
go backwards.
Right. It's not like, oh, here, this is all you, thinking that that's objectively a good thing. No. The good thing is whatever fuck it is that they're ready for.
Right. That's it.
Right. It's like like I say this a lot. Like if you show a 5-year-old a graduate level textbook, nothing's gonna happen. The 5-year-old's probably gonna like poop on it. I don't know.
Sneeze and then use it as
right. And if you force him to read this, he's not gonna get anything out of it. He's probably gonna cry and like, I don't know, run away or something. Something terrible. But anyways, right? So it's whatever the person's ready for.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you get the same thing. You get 9-year-olds that are like that one 9-year-old that's teaching a neuroscience, so on and so forth.
Right. Exactly.
Same idea.
Yeah. So it's not like independence versus dependence.
Right.
And dependence is not inherently bad. They may very well require that in order to learn whatever bullshit you're trying to teach them.
That's huge.
Yeah.
All these are huge.
Right, and because like think about it, right? Like from a mechanical standpoint, that's how the cerebellum learns to modify these patterns, these models, these feed-forward models, by relying on an external input that gives it discrepancy. And that discrepancy needs to be constant until the model has shifted to the new way.
So you need to be able to be aware of that to have a discrepancy. So it's like, okay, this is clearly different than this, right? That's and then that's like, okay, now because of these two things, here's a new feed forward.
Exactly.
And then so on and so forth. It's like now you have the next day, so on, more and more and more.
Exactly. So which is to say that person that doesn't know how to hinge, their hinging pattern is to not hinge.
Okay.
Right.
I can see that.
Right.
It's pretty binary, right?
Right. Exactly. At first, it's very binary.
Right.
So, because they have no pattern for hinging, their pattern for hinging is your pattern for hinging. You got to give them the whole pattern. right? That's a dependency thing, right? Like if you don't think of it, because dependency, it sounds like a threatening word, right? If like if I told you this 35-year-old is completely dependent upon you, it's scary. It's like get the fuck away from me. It's my life, right? So there's a lot of like negative connotation with the word. So if we just contextualize the word as this person has no ability to do this, i.e. they have no feed-forward model at all to do this. You need to, if you want him to do that, you need to provide the whole thing before he can start producing this himself.
So in order to provide the whole thing, I think I know where you're going with this. Obviously, we're both using general words, but to get super specific, at some point, you're going to have contact with the ground. Contact, I mean, up the joints, like
exactly,
tibia, fib on femur, and then from there on up to the hip.
Right, and you're gonna have to lay out all of that shit
while managing a torso leaning over with a vestibular system, controlling the unfalling.
Right, exactly. You know, it's like we get a lot of these questions in terms of like, what cues do I use? What do I tell people? No, fuck all of that. What cues do I use? Yeah, like fuck all of that. Like no, just
I haven't gotten asked that forever.
But
in a good way.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So no, they need to understand what needs to happen, right? And then you know, you figure out whatever ways you need to figure out, like whatever ways, for them to get all the pieces.
Right.
Right. It's because it's like
because imagine if somebody now had scoliosis, and then they have no idea. They know how to maybe hinge really well into one hip, but in reality, maybe that scoliosis has such a turn of quite literally a turn.
Right.
I don't know how else to describe it any more general.
Yeah.
They're not hinging to the one side of the hip because that's just them.
Right.
That's the one unit.
Right. Exactly.
I don't even know where to take it from here, but
but like so you know, if we break down the body as so this is how I break down the body for like just anti-gravitational functions, right? It's 3 functional subsystems. From the shin down to the foot is one system. Is the base of support. Because we like to think base of support is the foot, right? No. Shin is the base of support. In this theoretical model that I got going on, right? And then the femur is the engine. Okay, the muscles of the femur are like the production of like forces, right? But the femur is the actual engine. Okay, and then everything above the femur minus the arms is the thing that you are moving.
I like that.
Right. So right, exactly. When you think about hinge, it's or squat or whatever, it's absolutely that. In that the bottom of your femur acts as almost like a hammer onto the tibia, and then if you continue to apply this force, this ends up happening, right? And then it moves the pelvis and everything above the pelvis wherever you need to move it to.
It kind of happens,
Right, exactly, right. So you know, I think in like the old school way of thinking about it, if you're going this direction, you need knee extension, right? So then when you say that, you're inclined to think you need quad contraction. And quad contraction becomes a primary means for you to do that, right? And it's like the more you think about it, that doesn't make sense. Wait, what's supporting that?
Right, and then that's where your idea.
Right. Because like this way, all you really primarily need is hip extension, because hip extension gives you knee extension. Because hip extension is this, right? If this is the pelvis, this is the hip joint, right? Hip extension gives you this, right? And this is the femur, right? So So if you're already at an angle. Right. This is like
like step.
Right. You just do that.
Right.
So rather than like quad here and you do this. That doesn't make sense. Because
you need a base of support.
You need base of support.
Right. For reference.
Yeah, because for the quad to extend the knee, the base is at the hip. What the fuck is stabilizing the hip? That don't make sense.
Right.
Can't do that. It's like there's a reason why I cannot pull myself up into the ceiling. Right, got no base.
The pulley.
Right, exactly. But anyways,
exactly.
Right, so if you're trying to build a feed-forward model for somebody who doesn't have one, right?
Sure.
You're gonna need to start someplace simple.
Yeah.
Right. So you know, based on this 3-component model of like movement. First of all, you need to make this into one functional unit, one piece, right? That doesn't disintegrate. Like disintegrate not as in like break into 1,000 pieces, but to disintegrate, to no longer integrate.
I get it.
Right?
Yes.
Like, because if this happens, you're no longer integrated, are you? Like, right? So if you hold on to this, then you can have other functional systems to move this through space. Then it's integrated, right? So that's why ground-based work's excellent. But I think a lot of people use ground-based work for the sake of ground-based work. It never gets brought into non-ground context.
It's not layered.
Right, exactly. It's not layered, right? So then you build this first, and then this becomes an excellent foundation upon which to build a hinge feed-forward model. Because you already have a feed-forward model for how to integrate this thing into itself, right? Which is like breathing and PRI and stuff like that comes in, right? They do a very good job of this. Right. It's just that I think a lot of people don't know how to apply that to like non-PRI context. But of course, PRI people will say there's no such thing as non-PRI context, but you get my meaning. Right. But exactly, it's separate. It's separate, even though it's really not. You just separate it. It's not inherently separate.
That's how we understand.
Right. So anyways, so then this becomes a foundation for that hinge feed-forward model.
Right.
Then on top of this, you just add ephemeral control, and then you add that base of support.
Yep.
And then now this person is ready to explore his own independence. Because he has the pieces now. When he has nothing, he can't do that.
Hopefully they're ready.
Well, I mean, yeah.
But even then, they have to explore on their own.
Right. Then you can just like fuck with the needle. Right. Dependence, independence. You can now fuck with the needle.
So building on that, with whatever little time we got left, if you're trying to build that independence, and now they're upright, okay, like we got there. Now, they did have a predisposition for a head-centric kind of thought process.
Sure.
How do we, and this is maybe me just thinking out loud, or maybe making it more clear for everybody else, how do we manipulate, maybe not manipulate, but set the initial conditions for visual, the sensory, and vestibular.
For them to like back off, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It's very convenient from our perspective in that the eyes is the thing that links everything else in the head-centric reference, right? Because this has the most data. This brings in the most data out of the other two systems compared to computer vision, right? So my go-to was just to take out the vision, like have them close eyes and then go from there. Yeah. Right. Like and you know, because then they will have to rely on somatosensory, and for movement, somatosensory is king. Right. Right. It's like because you walk with this, right? You walk with your eyes, which is to say your eyes navigate and manage how you actually walk. But that's microscopic. That's like middle level management. Yep. Right. So I like to use UPS as a analogy for the nervous system. So middle management, like I don't know, regional directors or something like that, right? That is in charge of the Eastern United States. They probably don't fucking have any idea the daily lives of a driver. Sure. Of a UPS delivery guy, right? They don't need to know because their job is, you know, controlling such a big area. Operations. Right. So that's eyes. Like eyes tells you where to go, right? But your somatosensory system are the drivers, literally. Right. Eyes direct where you go, and then your somatosensory system actually gets you there.
Wow. I mean, I get it. Like,
yeah.
I think I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, this would be a great way to fucking end it. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, guys, that's another episode under wraps. Shoot me any questions you may have, any comments. I'm looking forward to any feedback we may have. If you want to get on this show, direct message me, email me, contact me somehow. We can do it through Skype or we can do it through somebody's house. I will see you guys next episode.